There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I have my esteemed colleague Marissa here, who keeps me in check and keeps everything in order. Make sure that everything goes well today. So we're gonna just give it a minute. We have a number of people signed up, and as these things typically go, you've been on these before, you know the drill. People are gonna come in and over the next probably minute or so, and so we'll just keep we'll keep tight for a minute and we'll jump in a second. Slides are showing there, Marissa. Everything looks good.
They
Perfect.
are, and chat and Q&A are open as well.
Perfect. All right. On that note, for those that are here, before we get going, if you have any questions or comments or whatever, we like to make these as interactive as you possibly can in a virtual world. Please drop us a note and let us so we can respond to that and share our insights with everybody. So, all right. How are our numbers looking, Marissa? Are we good? Good.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
we're good to start.
Okay, let's jump in as people try to get lunch and whatnot. So, thanks everybody for joining us. This has been a bit of a passion project for all of us here at ARIA for probably the last couple months of 2025. Really trying to get our heads wrapped around what the world of work and the world in general looks like, quite frankly. And so we came at it from the point of view of the wake up call because I fundamentally believe that 2026 is a year of continued transformation. So let's dive into that and we'll kind of walk you through where we're coming from. The first thing is, unless you've been living under a rock, last year's economy was super interesting, for lack of a better term. We obviously got into global trade volatility based on, the actions of the United States. Their tariffs reached multi-decade highs, things that we would never have even dreamed of before became the norm, which led to disruptions in supply chains, sort of COVID-ish kind of supply chain disruptions, contraction in trade volumes. We ended up with uh, certainly the resilience we were seeing in Canada. We saw uneven growth. Q1 of the year was super intense as people tried to pad their inventories prior to the implementation of the Trump tariffs. Then Q2 kind of took a nosedive. Q3, a bit of a rebound. People are talking about it being a whiplash type of economy. The other thing but we did see some resilience there. The nomenclature that came to be throughout the course of the year was something called the K-shaped recovery. And the K-shaped recovery, where the top earners thrive and the lower to middle income earners facing even tighter budgets. And the concern for that, and the reason we're bringing this up is when you look at GDP overall, about 70% of GDP, especially in Canada, is consumer driven. And overall, the GDP numbers look pretty good. But if that bottom part of the K recovery continues to worsen, that's going to be a drag on GDP, which is going to be an even bigger economic shock than we've seen thus far. One of the words that came out of last year and is certainly residing in the brains of many people now is something called fearflation, which is really the emotional anxiety that people have about affordability. That affordability issue continues to persist even though inflation has cooled, even though a lot of the numbers and metrics we're looking at suggest that affordability isn't really an issue on paper, but psychologically it remains an issue for us all. So the implications are we're going to see persistent uncertainty. We're going to see persistent volatility in prices, certainly in demand. The doom loop is potentially possible where as fearflation take holds, people accelerate their purchases. We saw this before Christmas, a big uptake in buy now, pay later plans, which then drives up prices, which then, people come to our organizations looking for COLA increases and adjustments, which are more psychologically driven than data driven. So there's those implications. Confidence matters. Employees are experiencing a tremendous amount of stress. We're living paycheck to paycheck. Monthly payments are going up, interest rates, etc. It more than what the consumer price index might lead us to believe. There's a lot of pressure out there. That also is translating into labor market pressures, where we have uneven demand. We've got cautious hiring. We have sector-specific strain. If you're in automotive, aluminum, lumber, steel, you're feeling those effects as tariffs have taken a hold in those marketplaces. Not surprisingly, then, when we talk to leaders, when we talk to organizations, over 90% of organizational leaders say that there is going to be significant transformation in the next 3 to 5 years. That's hardly surprising. I doubt anybody on this call would disagree with that. So, when we look into 2026, transformation, transition, change, those are the words that hold true for us. So, okay, so what do we do, Terry? What's Aria saying about this? Well, a couple of things. I think we can address fearflation in our organizations, being transparent with our plans, including our compensation, consistent messaging around that. The days of hiding behind things and not being clear and coherent on terms of those kinds of issues, I think become important. I think we can make cash flow supports available inside our organization and flexible benefits. That could look as simple as things like how can we support people with the sort of affordability issues that they are perceiving to be true. Communicate our campaign decisions fairly and accurately and clearly. Let's get out from behind the veneer that sometimes we find ourselves when we don't want to talk about those sorts of things. And prioritizing financial well-being as a core benefit inside an organization. Simple things like, can we provide budget tools? Can we provide financial literacy? Can we help with potentially sourcing some lower credit options for our employees? Thinking outside the box and not being boxed in with, well, that's not something we traditionally do, could be a game changer, and especially in a world where fearflation and affordability are top of mind issues. I think our leaders, and we'll talk more later on in the session around leadership. Leaders are under a tremendous amount of stress. We need to support them, but we also need to develop them. Empathy. Empathy is king here, or queen. It's key. And being appreciative and empathetic towards our employees is going to be super important and not dismissive of their concerns. And in that context, our leaders also equipping them with how they can support people by knowing where supports are in the broader community when issues around affordability take hold. So the bottom line, from our perspective, with respect to the economy, we can't control tariffs. Certainly not with the incumbent in Washington currently, nor could we be before, but this one seems a little bit more rich. We can't influence global politics. That seems like too big, but we can lower fear, and we can increase confidence internally inside of organizations. And I believe that if we reduce the monthly stress and make supports visible to our organizations and our employees, that will be a growth lever for us as we move forward through 2026. So how we address that first topic of the economy. So moving right along, right tied close next to this would be our demographics. We don't seem to talk a lot about this. Economics really, ruled the headlines in the past year, but demographics, aging, our birth rates, our immigration, these are all topics we need to get on the table, especially as we look forward into 2026. Um, I purposely put a flashing red light. This is a warning light. Canada has been in a slow burn. We're now moving into the warning lights are flashing when it comes to demographics. Our fertility rate in Canada is at a record low. There's 1.26 children for every woman in the Canadian population currently. That's at the lowest of the lowest of the lows. We are not reproducing our population at the rate that we need to in order to sustain our population. Full bore, full stop. Our median age now in Canada is risen to 40.6 years of age. That's high. Our seniors, those over 65, and we should probably change that definition at some point in time. I know a lot of people 65 and older who are a lot different than 65-year-olds 20 years ago. They're now almost 20% of our population. That is huge. Not on the slide, but our 0 to 14, our most recent cohort, which will be in 10 years coming online. I hate to use that term, but they'll be joining our ranks of our workforces. That's only 15% of our population. So just contrast those two numbers. That's a little bit frightening. This means that we have been historically as a country leveraging immigration as driving population growth, but anybody who's seen the last year in Canada, there's been a huge political backlash and political policy uncertainty with respect to immigration. Um, so our growth engine and our flashpoints here, this is huge, 97.6%. So close to 98% of the growth of the population in Canada, in our population over the last year has been through immigration, meaning only less than 2.5% of population growth has been internal to the country. So in order for our population to grow, which allows us to sustain the quality of life that we enjoy here in Canada, uh, close to 98% of it is through immigration. So while it has almost like a bad word to even talk about it now, this is what's fueling the Canadian economy and our demographic needs. What does this all mean? We have intense labor market pressure. We have a shrinking domestic talent pool. Our talent shortages continue to deepen. They're being masked a little bit by the turbulent economic sectors with ups and downs, and but nonetheless, this is continuing. It continues to be in the background, and if we don't pay attention to it, it's going to bite us badly. It also means that it's going to put strain on our public services. This is, I think, is important from an organizational perspective, if minimally from a tax perspective. Several years ago in the province of Ontario, the employer health tax, many of us are familiar with, was implemented in no small part because of demographic issues. But it also means there are fewer workers to hire, and more are retiring. Our healthcare costs are going to go up. That's going to trickle down to both the individual and the organizational level. The employer reality as well is hiring newcomers. That's facing cultural and political headwinds right now. Getting really good at this can really set you apart. So, next steps. What do we do about this, Terry? What are we going to do? Well, I think workforce planning by specific age bands becomes important. And just as a note, everybody on this webinar today will get our full document that we have created on this. It's a 24, 25-page masterpiece that provides a lot more detail and context behind it. We're giving you the broad brushstrokes here today, but you'll get this. It'll fill in some of the blanks that I'm sure some of you may be wondering about right now. Building a pipeline, for our youth, in engaging, how do we meet them where they are? Our return to office, mandates, good luck with that when you're talking to our Gen Z cohorts. Not that I like to be that guy with specific generational pieces, but that is something we're seeing. You're pushing rope uphill. Our competing for our prime age workers is going to become important. Things like apprenticeships, co-ops, early career programs in our school systems. These are things that those that invest in those now will reap the rewards. Certainly being more flexible with respect to our older cohorts, thinking differently, going back to my comment a few minutes ago around, 65 is the new 55. How do we engage that workforce in new ways, in creative ways? It doesn't always mean a 9 to 5 full-time, 37 and a half hour kind of work week. How can we leverage those cohorts that might otherwise might be, it's not a binary, I'm in, I'm out. Maybe there's a nice happy go between there. I think streamlining onboarding for our newcomers and communicating the economic value of immigration. We need to lower the temperature on the negativity that seems to be surrounding immigration right now. There's a lot of, at least I'm sensing, and maybe it's the news feeds that I get, but I'm sensing a lot of negativity towards immigration. Without immigration, this country's in a deep, deep trouble. It's in a serious pickle. And I think we can continue to promote the value of that inside our organizations as sort of a ground up or bottom up approach as opposed to a top down, leaving this to governments that not always do a good job of this. Partnering regionally, this one's a little bit out there. It's a bit of a stretch, but as somebody who's experiencing this personally, elder care solutions would be super helpful. We went all in on daycare years ago for youth care, and that became part of what dare I say, normalization. I think elder care is going to become equally important going forward to be able to support that narrative as well as we get, those sandwich generations, and we look at those numbers of large numbers of our population being in that 65 plus age category. We did it for daycare. Let's do it for elder care as well, and age-friendly workplaces. So, you might give a hall pass for having to go home to deal with a sick kid from school. Maybe it's the same thing we do with aging parents. Also, investing in automation, AI. We're going to get to AI in a minute because that seems to be the big panacea that may or may not be. We'll stay tuned. We'll see what we get to. But that can offset some of the demographic drag, which can free our employees to do higher value work. We'll get to that in a second. The crisis isn't inevitable, but the demographic pressure is real. Early workforce planning, balanced immigration advocacy, productivity gains through technology. These are the things that will help define, at least we believe, will be the things that will define organizational success in 2026 and beyond. So that's demographics, a topic that doesn't always get the attention that we believe it rightly deserves. Employee engagement. This is talked about often. Control, clarity, and confidence is our sort of tagline or line that we use with respect to that. Bit of the background here. Engagement drivers have shifted. There's a study of over 200,000 people worldwide over the last year. And what was super fascinating was traditionally the feeling valued was top one, two, three, or four listed attributes that employees needed or wanted to feel engaged. That has shifted to flexibility, stability, and trustworthy leadership. In other words, it's about anticipation of success has now become key. Employees will stay when they're engaged, and be engaged when they believe that the organization has a future. They're going to ask two key questions, and hopefully you can answer yes to both of these. The first question being, will my organization handle the change well and keep up its end of the bargain? So as times get tough, are they going to just do mass layoffs? In which case, I'm not interested. I'm going to look for another place to, provide my input. The second question being, can I see growth and success here in this organization? Those two questions have risen to the top of people's minds and obviously have a tremendous impact on engagement overall. So new behaviors have emerged as a result of lack of engagement or questioning engagement. Things like remote options. Again, I go back to these mandates by governments, big charter banks. No, sorry if you're on here and I'm being offensive. I'm not trying to be, but these return to office mandates are going to fly in the face of especially our younger generations. That's what they know. They went to school, virtually. Now you want them to come to an office. It's different for them. We see the rise of terms like coffee badging. Coffee badging is a term when somebody comes on in the morning, they grab a cup of coffee, they do the circuit, say hello to a few people, check in, and then exit the organization's physical location and goes back home to work. Micro shifting, another thing that we're seeing as part of the change in workforce habits, and it has an impact on engagement. Micro shifting. Micro shifting is carving up your day that meets your schedule. So I'm going to come in at 9:30 because I got to get the kids on the bus at 8:45. I'm going to work till noon and then maybe take a break because I do something else. I still put in my 7.5, 8 hours or however many hours it is, but I dictate or the employee dictates when that's going to happen. The work gets done. It's just not done in the traditional Dolly Parton 9 to 5 way. We're also seeing the rise, especially among those younger generations, those younger cohorts, around what we call polyemployment, or side hustles or side gigs. Often these are done for two reasons. One, that affordability issue we just talked about, and that psychology that I need to create more wealth and get more income. But the other reason they're doing it is oftentimes they're feeling unfulfilled, something that's called uh, basically boredom. And so they seek other alternatives to build skill sets. So that can be a win for us, by the way, because they're building skills they can bring back. But if we're not cautious and careful and in tune to it, they can also turn into what is often referred to as, especially among Gen Z, office frogs. What are office frogs? These are the constant changers. If they're not happy, they're not going to be like my dad or many of our parents who stuck it out for 35, 40 years in deep misery, because they wanted to keep their job. These younger generations will jump ship, hence the term office frog. So there's a lot of new behaviors that have emerged that we need to be cognizant of, which are potentially canaries in the coal mine or messages coming back to us that say we may have a problem here. The implications of all this, of course, um, engagement is now a strategic resilience indicator. It's a strategic imperative. You can't ignore this. If you do so, you do so at your own peril. Employees are prioritizing flexibility, stability, uh, good leadership over perks. The foosball table days are gone. Um, those are nice to haves, but they're not critical to keeping people engaged. Organizations will risk huge talent flights if these latest trends are ignored. You will see stalled innovation. Your organizations will take a hit. So, what do we do about this? What are our next steps? Well, we believe that making success visible and communicating change with clarity is absolutely imperative. And you're going to see a lot of common themes. And the last thing we talk about during our session today is about leadership because it all sort of funnels to leadership in organizations. But communication and managing change becomes super critical. If you don't do it well or don't demonstrate that you have the capability to do it well, people will hit the exits, likely. You need to strengthen our manager capability. You're going to hear that throughout this entire presentation today. Um, Empathy. This is the calling card of good leadership today. Sadly, not everybody has it, but empathetic conversations and follow through become uber important. People want to be heard. They want to feel like they belong. They want to feel like there's part of something bigger than themselves. You can't do that if you're having transactional interactions with your employees. Building flexible structures, with clear outcome expectations, hybrid, it's the new normal. Being flexible, micro shifting, not only just appreciating it exists, but endorsing it and supporting it. Compressed work weeks. This isn't new to us. I mean, how many on this call will compress your work weeks over the summer holidays? So it's not like we're asking for big changes. We're capable of doing these things. We just sometimes have to get out of our own way, I believe. Update our engagement strategy to measure confidence in leadership. It's certainly those that know our firm well. We have something called the Employee Pulse Assessment that measures three factors all tied to engagement, one being engagement, one being commitment, and one being satisfaction. They're similar constructs, a little bit different, which is why we look at it comprehensively. We're currently in the process working with our friends over at Western's Industrial Organizational Psychology Department on how to blend in this new research showing that confidence and leadership and the ability to handle change are critical pieces to engagement. So stay tuned for that. But I think we need to continue to look at it. I also believe, going back to our first topic, addressing affordability, and recognizing these are issues that, while seemingly outside of the purview of our organizations, trickle into them. So let's not ignore them. So I think those are some of the things that we can be doing going into 2026, which will give us a leg up on our competitors. Engagement in 2026 is about trust. It's about stability, and fundamentally, it's about believable progress. If you lower the volatility narrative, if you raise confidence, we fundamentally believe not only will engagement go up, but your performance and productivity will also rise as well. So that takes us through demographics, our economic forces, and of course engagement. The one that you've probably all been waiting for is when are you going to talk about the big panacea? The big panacea, of course, being artificial intelligence. Again, you'd have to be living under a rock for the last several years if you don't know what artificial intelligence is or haven't even heard about it. Um, Artificial intelligence, our take on this is it's the ability to free people to do meaningful work as opposed to menial work. And not to degrade menial work, but artificial intelligence is really, really good at it. So, some background here. I don't know how many people have heard about this, but there was a mass gathering of people in New York City on New Year's Eve at the Brooklyn Bridge under the presumption that there was going to be a massive fireworks display. Social media was very filled with photos of fireworks over the Brooklyn Bridge. Turns out that was the July 4th fireworks display. And this was, you know, th- people found out about this through social media. That's where it was perpetrated from. And when people found out that it was a ruse, that it was fake, that it was not real, the culprit was AI. They said AI did this. AI creates misinformation. AI didn't create the misinformation. Somebody on Reddit said that AI created the misinformation, but it was actually social media itself. Why am I telling you this story? Telling you this story is because we have a lot of misinformation coming out with respect to AI. We don't quite know it, we don't quite trust it, but we often, many times, will blame it for the misinformation that gets, sent around. And if you've been on any social media platform, some of the photos of, sharks eating people's heads off that look sort of real, but you kind of go, I don't think so. You can understand why AI takes the fall for the spread of a lot of information. Keep in mind that AI didn't create it. Somebody asked AI to create it. So that's a nuance. Humans are still running this. Work slop. AI has created this latest term, which I just adore this term, work slop, which is low quality AI output. I'm going to put it into ChatGPT or Copilot or my favorite AI tool, create something for me, and then it spills something out and you copy and paste and Bob's your uncle. Um, and oftentimes the quality can be quite poor. It can be actually quite wrong. Um, and we did a webinar back in the earlier in 2025 talking about how the pure garbage that can be created by AI, but everyone says, "Oh my goodness, it must be great." So we need to be careful about that. We also, a lot of data now suggesting that many of us are suffering from digital burnout. We're on computers today. So we're kind of exacerbating that. Our apologies. Almost two-thirds of employees are suggesting some degree of digital burnout where they need time out because they're in front of computer screens all day long. And we're not interacting with other humans, which is good for the soul, good for dopamine releases, good for, the cuddle hormones and all those great things that happen when we interact with others. So we know that that is the case, and up to 40% of people reporting work slop in their organizations. Kind of big. AI really should be unburdening our teams. It shouldn't be making more work for us, it should be making less work for us. It should improve our decision quality. It can elevate the impact that HR has in the organization because those tasks, those routinized menial tasks that we do over and over again, stimulus response, rinse and repeat type tasks can be handled quite readily and quite well by artificial intelligence. But we have to remember, AI is not a substitute for the key we believe is key to success in organizations today, which is empathy and trust. Absent trust, absent empathy, And I'm going to suggest you have the markings for a colossal collapse of your organization. These are not nice to haves, they're must haves now. And AI simply cannot replace it. And maybe I'm the old guy in the room, but I don't see AI being empathetic because you need the community, you need the human interaction, but time will tell. Certainly not in the next little while, certainly not in 2026, but I could be wrong. So, what are the implications? Well, AI without guardrails creates more work, not less. So if you're just, if you say, hey, go ahead and have fun with ChatGPT and you have them put some parameters in place around that. Blind trust in AI will increase your risk of errors, reputational damage. This is especially true when it starts to merge into the world of talent and HR. It can become gong show. Psychological safety becomes an important consideration here, and we'll dump that into our leadership conversation in a moment. One of the things that has become apparent is if you are in an organization with low psychological safety, if you're in an organization where fear of failing is or failure is not appreciated, or the fear of failing rather is something that is rampant and people don't want to make mistakes, AI adoption declines. They're afraid to make a mistake. Our whole lives as humans is about learning from our mistakes. I think we need to embrace that as we continue the AI journey, and create that psychological safety. That will drive adoption of AI. But if we're afraid of it and we think we're going to mess up, then it kind of stops it in its tracks. And we got to watch out for our digital burnout. Digital burnout is real. We're spending way too much time behind blue screens or behind screens of blue light. And it's not only causing us to feel burnt out from lack of interaction with others, but it also is taking a physical toll on our health. So we need to be mindful of that. So, next steps. What do we do about this? Well, I think we can automate the trivial tasks, um, and protect meaningful work, free up our time to do that, deep critical thinking work. And we talked about this in our webinar last year, um, around don't give up um, the critical thinking work to AI. This is what sets us apart. We need to maintain that ability to think critically. We compare our artificial intelligence with objective assessments and publish those guardrails. Here's how we use it. Here's how we don't use it. Those become super important and super critical to success in our organizations. Upskill our managers as well. Again, we're putting a lot of pressure on our leaders and managers. So give them the tools for good AI literacy, and make sure they have that empathy piece. And by AI literacy, one of the simple things we can do is learn to question the algorithm, learn to question the outcomes, build in a mechanism to say, don't take AI output or outcomes at face value. Question them, and ensure that what it is producing is real. And then combat digital burnout, set norms, time blocks, recovery rituals, which is like, build it into calendars and say you should take a break. We force a lot of industries where you have to do it. Air traffic controllers, as an example, work a 90-minute shift and then must take a half-hour break. That's critical thinking in terms of how to get away from digital burnout. And measure, time returned to humans, and reinvest that time into coaching and problem solving, next level sort of things. So don't just implement AI and hope for the best, but actually, there's a possibility and capability here of studying it and seeing what the implications are. Bottom line, AI's job is to return time to people. So let's use it to accelerate humanity, not replace it. Pair the adoption of that with good guardrails and well-being practices. AI, meaningful, strategic, and empathetic work. Leave that to humans. Let AI do the other work as well. So that's our take on artificial intelligence. But the big takeaway I'd have is it's not the panacea that many people, I think, falsely believe that it may be. Recruitment. Well, we couldn't go through a talk about, talent and the future of work without talking about recruitment and having a comprehensive strategy. Some of the background here, of course, is our economic volatility that we started off today with. That's masked our demographic pressures. We still have skill mismatches. We have demographic pressures. It's not easy. AI is being introduced into recruitment and it increases efficiency gains, but also that notion of work slop. Spam locations where candidates will now use AI to send out thousands of resumes. So, just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, stealing a term from the movie Jaws, we now have more and more applications. And by the way, those applications are coming as if they've been heaven sent because you take your resume, you take the job posting, AI takes it together and creates this magical, beautiful person that then gets coached by AI and how to go in and have interviews with you. And it's a bit of a facade as opposed to reality. So that gets kind of messy. But the candidate experience, flexibility and transparency and trust is a non-negotiable, especially for Gen Z. We've seen this, that the trust is super critical. I think it's critical for anybody, but in particular for that group. The implications here, of course, watch out for spam locations. They obscure the genuine fit. Polished AI resumes mask gaps that exist. We got to be more attuned to that and aware of that. Decision quality has to rise. The candidate experience is a trust builder. So as we go through recruitment, that's a journey that is really exposing the organization or exposing the candidate to the organization. And with the demographic crunch upon us, mishires cost us more than ever before. The talk about turnover costs, being 1.5 to 3 times the salary. I think that is a very low number, especially when we have a demographic crunch. That means it's very difficult to find talent. So next steps, I believe everybody should be adopting an ABR. Always be recruiting. Cultivate your pipelines. Keep, live skill maps so that it's not just a once a year kind of review of what do we need. And assign relationship owners inside your organizations that own these tasks. Use AI wisely. You can widen your source, but anchor decisions in documented criteria. You know, have those human in the loop checks. Those become super critical and important. Move beyond just scanning documents, and move beyond just asking simple questions. Skill-based screening, contextual prompts. So don't just ask for generic examples, ask for real life examples. It's harder for people to copy and paste, especially if they're doing a online interview. There's apps now that will run in the background, and as you ask questions, it will scour their resume in real time and provide a prompt to the candidate as if I was a candidate talking to you, and it would put across my screen how to answer it. Those programs are hard to discern when you are using examples, specific real life examples from your organization as opposed to generic examples. The other thing, you know, authenticity, how we get to authenticity. Don't ask general questions, but ask specifically, tell us what you did. Again, hard for AI prompts to get around that. Although I suspect that'll change over time, but be mindful of that. Objective tools. We're big proponents of assessment here at ARIA. Assessment becomes critical. Assess fit with objective tools and is super, super critical because the subjective world has been inundated with this AI. And remember, AI is artificial at the start of it. Elevate the candidate experience. What are the steps? What are our preferred channels for communicating? It's amazing to me how little we use the telephone anymore. It's more email and text because that I can call somebody like Norby or text them, they get back to me right away. What are the preferred communication methodologies? Let's find that out and use them accordingly. And then measure what matters. Time to getting a quality slate of candidates as opposed to just time to offer. Assessment completion rates, shortlist diversity, what works inside your organization, but just changing the narrative a little bit on um, some of those measures, rather. So, recruiting 2026, always on. Always be recruiting. Okay. AI assisted, not driven, and assessment anchored. I think bringing in good assessment becomes an imperative as we go forward. So, and combining your transparency with candidate experience. The candidate experience should be top drawer, absolutely brilliant to build trust and hire for impact. Only got a couple more, so stay with us. We're doing okay on time. HR compliance. We did a workshop on this, or webinar on this back in October, so this is a quick summary, but there's complexity on Ontario's landscape. It's across the country. We've just had a shake up minimum wage, pay transparency, AI disclosure, candidate experience. These are all codified into law now. Just read before coming on the webinar that the feds are now going to be cracking down on uh, contractors. So prepare for that. That's coming. The new Employment Standard Act mandates around salary ranges being disclosed, mandatory AI disclosure, ban on Canadian experience requirements. All these need to be disclosed. So the implications, compliance is now strategic. Your candidate experience is now regulated. What's once considered best practice is now law. I always find that fascinating. You need to disclose AR governance is essential. Pay equity and wage compression is intensifying, all which needs to be disclosed. It's increasing our administrative complexity, no doubt, but this is where we are today. So next steps, make sure your HR strategy is aligned with legislation, compensation reviews, updated job postings, compliance training, obviously as well. I believe this, regardless of the HR legal landscape, just a good candidate experience through the process, especially with respect to recruitment. I think that's good business practice that shouldn't have to be legislated, but is clear communications, automated updates, retention monitoring, implement AI governance, ensure by governance, document and disclose your AI use and oversight, timely interview follow-up and record retention. You now have a 45-day window to get back to somebody you interviewed. The fact we have to legislate that is depressing for me because I just think that's good business practice, but apparently some people need it to be reminded. And leverage AR solutions for pay equity and compliance support, or opt out for some managed support if it becomes burdensome. Bottom line, these changes are now law with likely more to follow in the years to come. And so proactive alignment um, with those requirements that helps build trust and engagement, reduces your risk, and supports your overall organizational success. Culture, adaptability, transparency, and trust. Um, that's at the core of what culture can be defined as. Alignment of values and strategies is essential. Leadership accountability is critical. I always find it absolutely fascinating when you go to organizations and have a conversation about values. And a great example was during a training session earlier this year, where this big training center along the side wall was their 7 values listed in these big posters. And when I asked the participants to talk about the values of the organization, they had no clue, despite the fact that if we're sitting on a wall, they could readily see the disconnect with values and strategy. You do that at your own peril. These have to be consistent and aligned, in our opinion. And that falls to our leaders in a lot of cases. Implication, your culture is a competitive advantage. Your brand, employer brand is super critical, especially if only because of the demographics crunch that we find ourselves under. Um, Strong adaptive cultures win, top talent, retention. These things are the result of a good adaptive culture. Supporting the human connection becomes important. Well-being and wellness becomes beyond, we believe, move beyond the traditional work-life balance, I think, is a wellness initiative. Flexibility is a wellness initiative. Financial literacy is a wellness initiative. Social wellness is a wellness initiative inside our organizations. So that's the wellness rethink. Next steps, um, revisit and reinforce the values and embed accountability and pay more than lip service to them. They're there for a reason. And if we need to change them, but let's embrace them. Invest in learning and prioritize well-being and wellness. I think that's super critical. Um, using monitoring and adapting good feedback mechanisms and good culture metrics, not just smile sheets like at the airport where did you think the bathroom was clean and you press one of three emojis on a wall. We got to move into much deeper analysis and assessment of this. And then humanize technology to enhance collaboration. Bottom line, culture is a living system anchored in your values, accountability, human connection. We need this to thrive through the change that is coming at us and will continue to come at us. And last but not least, as we get closer to our time, leadership. The three things I'd say about that is capacity development and strategy. What do I mean by that? Fundamentally, again, there's a red alert here. We are in such peril with respect to leadership in our organization. It's under a tremendous amount of pressure. We have high levels of burnout. We have high levels of stress. We're rapidly promoting people. They're getting over their skis. They're punching above their weight class and not particularly well. We have huge skill gaps. AI is accelerating this. Entry-level roles are disappearing, so those traditional training grounds where people would get their sea legs are disappearing, and so we're bringing them in without that fundamental foundational pieces. This is tough. We're introducing pipeline gaps. This is hurting us. The implications are our pipelines are at risk. That means promotions and preparation challenges are huge for us in our organizations. Trust and engagement. This is imperative. We saw that with engagement. That means clear communication, wellness, and dare I say, empathy. So next steps. What are our leadership needs? And build tiered pipelines for these. We can't leave this to chance. What are we doing to ensure that we have a pipeline, readily available pipeline of leaders? We've got to capture and transfer the knowledge of those that are leaving, and they are leaving en masse. Um, Shift this from an event, we're going to have a training session once a year, to routines, continual, constant routines around leadership development, um, and leadership strategy as well. You center your change navigation. What we mean by that is ensure that people understand the why of the changes that are happening inside our organization. You'll build trust through communication and routines. And again, that notion of supporting holistic wellness, just huge on this, as well as decreasing digital burnout and use AI thoughtfully to augment coaching and development. But bottom line here is early systematic investment in leadership development paired with practical routines and holistic wellness will steady our organizations through the demographic shifts as well as the ongoing change. Um, and investment is needed. We can't leave this to chance. We need to invest in continual development of our leaders because we put a lot of burden on them. So that is sort of the eight sort of key pieces we saw as we reflected on 25, looked into 2026. So as we look ahead, I think we're looking at a landscape with economic disruption continuing, demographic pressures continuing, evolving employee expectations, and rapid advancements in technology. So our success is going to depend on agility, our transparency, a people first approach where we can navigate those compliant rules, rethink recruiting, build resilient cultures, and continue to build, enhance, and support our leaders. And it's super critical. Focusing on clear communication, practical support, strategic investment in technology and talent. In doing so, I think we'll lower the uncertainty in our organizations, we'll build the trust that's required to ensure that we have engagement and position our organizations for growth no matter what challenges arrived. And at ARIA, as those that know us well, it's a people first, evidence-based approach that we take. We tailor for the small to medium-sized business world, mid-market organizations. We focus on compliance, we build leaders, we provide objective assessments, and we help build proactive engagement strategies. These are the things that we get excited about and jump out of bed every morning to do. We reduce your risk, build trust, and help drive performance, hopefully in this volatile, fast changing world. So, with that, I thank you for your time today. Kept you 4 minutes longer than we had anticipated. Marissa, I'll hand it back to you to see if we have questions, comments. Sure, we've probably, hopefully, triggered a few thoughts and reactions among some people here today. And again, just to reiterate, we will be providing you with a much more comprehensive document that digs into a little bit more around what I offered to you today. So, Marissa, anything that we need to address, comments, questions,
Yeah,
chat?
we do have a question about which sectors and professions do you think are particularly vulnerable to labor shortages?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the data would suggest that we're seeing it in service-based sectors, incredibly so in healthcare. Anybody's in that sector would know that well. Our skilled trades continue to suffer, and however, that's changing, which is to be applauded. I'm not sure that there's any one sector that's immune from the demographic challenges, some more than others. And of course, what's confusing that or making that a little bit more complicated to understand is the economic challenges that are changing some of the business. As example, manufacturing. Is that a demographic issue? Is that an economic issue? It's hard to discern, although we do know with respect to manufacturing that the mass amount of people looking to retire in the upcoming years is dreadfully depressing because it's leaving us exposed. So hopefully that answered the question. So anything else?
What sectors are seeing leadership succession challenges and where will these pressures be?
Again, probably where I don't think it's immune to any one particular sector. Some organizations do a bang up job of this. They're very, very good at developing their leaders. I'll save that narrative because I don't want to call anyone in or out on that one. Um, I'm not seeing a sector specific gap. Again, it's more organizational dependent. Maybe a weak answer, but that's how we see it. So,
And then we have one more question. When working with younger generations, I notice additional time off is often more desired and more frequently requested. What are the typical starting vacation times you see, and how do they increase based on seniority and responsibility?
Uh, so it's a great question, and so I'm a big proponent of one size fits one, not a one size fits all. And unfortunately, and certainly reach out. But in the book I wrote a few years ago called Desuckify Work, I talked about how we're sort of hemmed in by what I would call Stephen Taylor or Taylorism. 1900s Bethlehem Steel Works, where measurement of everything and everybody treated exactly the same became the norm. I would argue in that context, well, there may be averages. Meet the person where they are. If they want more time off, then boil it down to, well, if you want X, here's how much value you generate for our organization. We're going to pay you Y if you want to take that time off, as opposed to, well, we give, the first year 2 weeks and the third year 3 weeks. Hey, listen, if you want 15 weeks off at ARIA, I'll talk to you all day long, but don't expect to be paid the same amount as somebody who's only taking 3 weeks off. So that's just good common sense and knowledge. But I think we need to start to become more open to that and get out of the, tight lanes and guardrails we have in place around these sorts of things. And then be transparent about that conversation. Well, how come Marissa gets 15 weeks off? Well, that's what Marissa chose, but Marissa's getting um, rewarded or compensated differently. And I think those conversations would be really fun to have and really exciting. But it also takes, I'll go back to my comment, that takes empathetic, good leadership that are good at communicating and not like, well, it's just cuz. So, so anyway,
All
so.
right, we've got another question about how do you go about maintaining equality when having to offer flexibility of working arrangements for younger generations when not all roles allow for this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, certainly it's hard to do and I just use it as an example, it's hard to do in a manufacturing type of environment. Maybe more flexibility with service-based environments where there's not inputs are not, dependent on, or your outputs are not dependent on certain inputs. So I think that probably is a sector specific piece. But again, I think at the end of the day, this comes down to communication and Mikasa Sakasa, like let's have that conversation about, listen, if you need to, if you need to come in at 9:30 because you got to get the kids on the bus, that's fine. Just don't expect to come in at 9:30, go for lunch at 12, come back at 1:30 and hit the road at 4 and say, but I want to be paid the same as the person who gets in at 8:30 and leaves at 5:30. That just doesn't make sense. And again, but have those open conversations. Let's not hide behind it. Let's just have those open conversations. Transparency is always critical, in my opinion. So,
Okay. And then one more, a bit of a follow-up to the vacation question. Have you seen any organizations successfully implement like unlimited vacation?
yes. And a couple, one that I know of, one that we work with. And the fear in that is everyone's going to abuse that. It's actually, when you look at the data, people actually take less time on average when you have unlimited vacation. Super interesting. And part of the reason I think because of that is when you have, well, hey, Marissa, hey, Fred, hey, Sally, you better use up your vacation time or you're going to lose it. And then people take time that and say, hey, what'd you do for your holidays? Well, I stayed at home and mowed my lawn. And maybe that's fun for you. Not for me. I want to go south because it's super cold out right now. So that's just me. So great questions. I love that. Super fun. We should have like a big, gathering and have a chat with this. Well, we do. It's called Disrupt HR. It's coming in the fall if you have never been. Shameless plug.
That's it that I see for questions.
Perfect. Wonderful. Again, we'll be sure to get this out to you. Our big missive, labor of love over the holidays, putting that together. But I think there's some really good information in there. And as always, if we can help you in any way, any challenges you're facing around leadership or recruitment, engagement, whatever it is, we'd love to help. We'd love to dig in. So reach out. We'd appreciate it. So thanks, everybody. And Happy New Year to you all. And let's go get them for 2026. So, wonderful. Thanks, Marissa. Thank you, everybody.